Good morning. It's a privilege to be here today to share my vision with you. I feel that climate change isn't just a challenge, it's actually a $1 trillion opportunity. The reason it's such a big opportunity is that energy is the most important industry on Earth. Energy accounts for all of our comfort, convenience, and most of all, our incredible GDP growth over the last century. This is a graph showing GDP per capita for the last 500 years. You'll notice it's pretty flat for most of the time, but it takes off like a rocket ship right during the Industrial Revolution when we learned how to harness cheap energy. And energy is a huge, huge industry. It's fully 10% of the entire $80 trillion global GDP. And when energy costs are low, GDP goes up. Those are always in exact inverse harmony. But our cost per unit of energy has been going up for the last 70 years, and we need to bring that back down if we really want to get the GDP going way back up again. And price really matters. This is a graph showing how much the size of the energy market grows as you reduce energy costs, even by only as little as a penny. This is showing, over on the left, nuclear energy at about 7 cents a kilowatt hour, renewables at about 6 cents, natural gas at 5, coal at 4, and oil at 3. Each time you shave 1 penny off the cost, there's almost a $1 trillion increase in the size of the market. Over time, almost all commodities have been flat or slightly rising. If you look at the price of oil, the price of beef, the price of metals, the only thing that has gone down consistently over the last 70 years is computing power. Computing power has gone down dramatically. So how can we harness this computation reduction in price and technology to reduce energy costs? Well, I will answer that. I will share with you my story about how I came to the realization, show you how my thinking has evolved, and tell you how I believe we can use computation and technology to dramatically reduce energy costs across the world. Well, my journey started by selling candy at the bus stop as a young boy. I was buying candy bars for 8 cents and selling them for 9, making 1 penny on each one. And I learned a little lesson in buy low, sell high, or buy low, sell slightly higher. And I took that money that I made to buy some woodworking tools. I was really excited about woodworking and metalworking in junior high school. And I started making checkerboards and bowls and all kinds of products and selling those. And an insight changed for me. First, I was buying some products and selling them for a little bit more. But now I was using my hands to manufacture things and take raw materials and make them worth a little bit more. But then a transformative moment came for me. It was during the energy crisis in 1973. I was a teenager growing up in Southern California, and I saw long lines of cars waiting to buy ration gasoline. This was Ventura Boulevard in Los Angeles, a mile-long line of cars just to buy $5 of gasoline on odd or even numbered days based on the last digit of your license plate. And that really had a big impact on me. It made me start thinking about alternative energy and how else we could power our planet. I started making all kinds of little parabolic concentrators, little dishes to boil hot dogs in, little concentrators out of aluminum, and I even started making little engines to put in the focus of those to turn that into mechanical energy. And I turned those ideas into a small company called Solar Devices. It was a little mail-order business I did as a teenager, selling kits and plans in the back of Popular Science magazine. This led to another transformation for me. Now I realized, instead of just buying something and selling for a little bit more, instead of making things out of my hands, now I was using intellectual property. This was really intoxicating to me. The idea to be able to take some ideas that you had, go down to Kinko's and copy those ideas on paper, and then sell those for more, that was really, really exciting. I took that into college with a really, really great passion for engineering and for science, and I graduated from Caltech, actually, the exact month that the IBM PC was released. The IBM PC was released. I went down and bought one of those computers at Computerland in Pasadena, and I started learning how to program. I worked with my brother to make a software product called HAL. It was a natural language interface to Lotus 123, and Lotus acquired the company for $10 million. So I learned a lot about software at the Lotus Development Corporation. This was in the early 1980s. Then I started a company called Knowledge Adventure for my son because I was really passionate about having him fall in love with learning. I had a magical 4th grade teacher that made me fall in love with learning. I wanted to try and help him and his whole generation fall in love with learning. That company, Knowledge Adventure, sold for $90 million to Vivendi. In 1996, I was so passionate about entrepreneurship that I decided to start Idealab as a technology incubator. This was basically a company to make companies. We really wanted to do something where we could have multiple companies under one roof. And we started off with this concept, and our first 12 ideas in 1996 were eToys and CitySearch and Cooking.com and Answers.com, and a few of those companies, actually 7 of those first companies, eventually went public. And that was able to fund my development of Idealab into a large technology incubator in Southern California. And in 23 years now, we have created more than 150 companies in many different areas. And that funded my passion for renewable energy, allowing me to get back into that in many of the companies we created. Now to my lessons learned and how we came up with this new idea in energy. Well, across all those companies, we had 45 successful acquisitions and IPOs. We had 45 companies that are operating in our portfolio right now, and we have 60 that closed or didn't succeed. And I learned a lot of lessons from those 60 companies that did not succeed. My most valuable lessons learned were these 4. These are the top 4 lessons that I wish someone had told me 30 years ago, well before I started Idealab. The very first one is timing. You might be ridiculed for having an idea ahead of your time, but if it's first ridiculed, then opposed as it starts threatening people, but then you push it all the way to being accepted as being self-evident, then you have truly changed the world and made the world a better place. So the ability to find an idea that's a contrarian idea, but then fight all the way till it has acceptance is a really, really powerful thing. The second lesson, iterate. I started off, I even named it Idealab because I love ideas. I always thought everything was in the idea. But I learned that product market fit is so important, and the only way to get product market fit is to adapt your product to what the market actually wants. So I actually realized you need to iterate the idea many, many times to be successful. I realized in hindsight, I should have called it Iterate Lab, not Idealab. Next, use Moore's Law. When you look back at that graph I showed of computation going down, so many things are flat or going up in price. But Moore's Law, Gordon Moore, who started Intel, claimed that the cost of microprocessors and the size would go down by a factor of 2 every 18 months, and that has been true. Living with exponential curves versus linear is so important and so powerful. Nothing has ever gone down as much in price as the cost of computation. And I'll give you one vivid example right here. This is a memory card from the space mission. It consists of 32 wires by 32 wires, all wrapped around some little cores of memory. So there's 1,024 bits, 32 by 32 here. 1,024 bits for $1,000 in the 70s. This right here, about the size of my pinky, is 128 gigabytes. So in this period, the size went down 100 to 1, the price went down to 100 to 1, and the processing power went up 1 billion times. 128 bytes, 128 gigabytes. Nothing else in history has seen that change in cost effectiveness in a given period. So you need to harness that. My idea was to try and harness that in the energy domain, and I'll tell you about that in just one moment. The final lesson, persistence. The emotional journey of doing anything great is always met with a dark chasm of despair, a dark swamp of despair in the middle. Things always start off seeming so great. You start off with this great new idea, and you really want to make it fly, but then as the reality set in, you realize the challenges. And powering through that point in the middle to the other side is what I learned is the difference between success and failure. So many times, companies go through this and feel there's no hope, but there really is hope. If you power through this dark swamp of despair, you can really, really make a big, powerful impact. So now, how have I taken these lessons learned and applied them to the climate challenge? These 4 lessons, timing, iteration, Moore's Law, and persistence. So what's the problem that we face in the world today? Well, we all know that we produce a lot of trash. Every person on Earth produces about 1 pound of trash per day. So 7.5 billion people on Earth put about 7.5 billion pounds of trash into landfills every day. Less well known is that we each produce about 31 pounds of CO2 trash that we put up into the atmosphere. All of us in this room probably even more because of the lifestyles we have. But on average, every person on Earth puts 31 pounds of trash into the atmosphere every day. So we're basically using this thin sliver of the atmosphere as our new landfill for CO2. So what has happened? Well, for all of history, we've had about 250 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. But just starting after the Industrial Revolution, it's taken off. And this century, it's taken off even faster. We've now crossed 415 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. And the effects, of course, have been catastrophic. We've seen them all over. There's more fires, there's more severe weather, winters, everything is changing in the climate. And most importantly, we are adding heat to the Earth at a crazy rate. So listen to this. I was staggered when I learned this. That thin layer of the atmosphere is bringing in more heat. That extra heat that we're putting into the earth and into the oceans is the equivalent of 3 Hiroshima bombs every second. At first, when I heard that, I thought that must be a mistake. It must be every year, it must be every month, maybe even every day. No, it's every second. Every second, the extra heat we're bringing into the earth is the equivalent of 3 Hiroshima bombs. So, what are the things we can do to change the world, and how can we use computation power to make a difference? Well, the first is energy storage. If we can store energy and make storage as cheap as dirt, then we really can make an impact with renewable energy. The second, solar process heat. How can we take the sun's energy, concentrate it on Earth, and use it to power the things that we use in industry today? And finally, carbon capture removal. How do we use CO2 as our friend? How do we go back in time by taking it out of the air? I'll tell you the answer to all three of those things. So first, everyone here knows wind and solar have had a dramatic reduction in cost. Solar alone hasn't gone down as fast as computation, but has gone down 200 times in the last 3 decades. And the sun is the most uniformly distributed natural resource on Earth. In fact, we reached a very critical point just in 2017. At 2017, wind and solar, this was a tipping point in all of history, because wind and solar became cheaper than fossil fuel generated electricity for the first time in history. So basically, renewables have won, but at the wrong time. So here's the cost of different electricity from different sources. Diesel-generated electricity is about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Coal's about 6 cents. Combined gas plants are about 5. Wind is 3 and solar is 2. So you might say, well, what's wrong? We've already won. 3 cents, 2 cents. It's already cheaper. Well, the problem is, as you all know, it only comes when the sun is shining, when the wind is blowing. What do we do the other times? So that's why the real greatest hurdle is not producing energy cheaper anymore from renewable sources, it's storing it. It's storing it to when we need it. Low-cost storage is the holy grail. The holy grail is to store energy at a cost that's so low, which when you add it to the price of wind and solar, it's cheaper than fossil fuels. And there's no way to do that today. There currently are only 3 ways to store energy. Chemically, with batteries of all types, thermally, with hot or cold, or mechanically, with gravity or compressed air or flywheels. And here's the cost of each of those things. Remarkably, it costs way more to store energy than to make it. Look at this, flywheels cost 45 cents a kilowatt hour to store energy. Even lithium-ion batteries, even after all the scaling from Elon Musk and Tesla and everything, 25 cents a kilowatt hour. The cheapest storage in the world is 17 cents a kilowatt hour, is basically pumping water up a mountain, pumped hydro. We need a big factor of improvement over pumped hydro to be able to make renewable energy work. We need to get down near 3 cents. Well, pumped hydro is basically a mountain with 2 reservoirs. Basically a hill with a reservoir on the top and a reservoir on the bottom. You pump water up, you let it flow back down, you generate in reverse. Well, we need to come up with some way to simulate that, because all the good places on Earth where that can be done, all the good places where you could dam up a river are taken. We need to simulate a way to do that. How can we bring computation into that to try and make the cost of storage cheaper? Well, that's what I and my CTO, Andrea, began brainstorming about at the company, and we looked at all different things. We looked at lifting gravel up a ski lift. We looked at building mounds and having conveyor belts. We looked at building tall concrete silos. We looked at all these different ideas, even down to building things that look like Roman aqueducts to pump water into. We looked at a crane lifting up weight, trying to lower the weight back down to get the energy back. None of those would work. None of those were even close to what was necessary to get the price to work. And then we had a eureka moment using computation. The eureka moment was, what about if we made a computer-controlled crane with computer vision so we could locate blocks automatically and stack them into a tower dynamically? That computer-controlled crane idea with multiple arms led to us getting to 3.5 cents. Very, very close to that magic number of 3 cents. Already a huge, huge jump. We started a company based on this called Energy Vault, and basically it looks like this. Here's a wind farm, and then there's a tower with a crane lifting up blocks when the wind is blowing, ready to lower the blocks back down to get the energy back when you need it. Effectively, it looks like this. You have the blocks down near the ground on the left. As you have energy from the sun or the wind, you lift the blocks up. You get the tower in the center, built around the crane. That's storing a huge amount of potential energy. Then you lift the block and lower it back down to the ground when you want the energy back. This is very, very powerful. It's many, many megawatts. Each tower is 35 megawatt hours, so it could power a whole city. And what this basically did is this used timing, because the world needs this right now, iteration, lots of trial and error, Moore's law, because we use computation and computer vision to make this work, and a lot of persistence to try and get to the solution. So now the new cost of storing energy, down at 3.5 cents, is 5 to 6 times cheaper than the cheapest energy storage ever. This finally makes renewable stored electricity a reality. So we announced this just last year. And after announcing it, again based on timing, this received huge global interest. Almost every wind farm, solar farm, desal plant, everywhere contacted us about using this kind of storage to take renewable energy and make it more continuous. Because if you can make it not intermittent anymore, that would make a big difference. We got more than $10.5 billion of orders in just the last 9 months. So we are rapidly trying to scale this all around the world to try and make this a reality. We even got a new idea from a customer after launching. The new idea was brought to us by a coal company, actually. A coal company in Virginia reached out to us and said, hey, I have 27 million cubic yards of coal ash, waste coal ash that I have to pay to get rid of, to remediate. Could you use that in the blocks? Because each of our blocks, there's 4,000 35-ton blocks. Could you use that as the mass? And we said yes. So not only does that save having to use dirt in the blocks, they paid to get rid of that material, so that lowered the cost even further, down to 3 cents. And our goal is to get it even further over time as we scale this globally. This is the first system. It's built for the Switch energy grid. This is a rendering of it in a valley in Switzerland. That one tower in the middle will power that whole community just by taking renewable energy and storing it to when it's needed. So that's number one. Energy storage, almost as cheap as dirt. What's the second one? Solar process heat. There are many things that we do in energy that can't be provided by electricity. We use fuel for many things. In addition to transportation, fuel is used for all of industry. So we use fuel at many different temperatures. At lower temperatures, like making steam, cooking, and so on, we use fuel for that. That's about 2% of global emissions. But above 1,000 degrees centigrade, this is a graph showing temperature across the bottom. For methane steam reforming, making cement, making steel, making glass, and making hydrogen, we use fuel at high temperatures, and that's 20% of global emissions. So I wanted to come up with a way to try and use concentrated solar energy, almost like I did back when I was a teenager, but at a much, much higher degree, and I have way more resources now with Idealab to attack this, to try and make concentrated solar energy achieve these 1,000-degree temperatures. Well, right now, concentrated solar normally looks like this. It's a field with large metal structures holding big mirrors that are tracked toward a central tower. The central tower is huge, many meters across and 200 meters tall. And the highest temperatures ever achieved are 600 degrees centigrade. So the only thing you can do with this is make steam and run a steam turbine. Well, I wanted to invent a new way to make almost like micro mirrors that would be computer controlled and be able to point so precisely you could achieve any temperature you want. So that's what we worked on, inventing a new way, much smaller mirrors, all using computer vision technology. Basically, the gaming industry and the cryptocurrency industry have made computer graphics cards, have insane computing power for a very low price. We use that to control all the mirrors. So now we have a field that looks like this, much smaller mirrors, each about the size of these tables here, all tracked very precisely with cameras that are looking at every mirror and knowing its position accurate to a 20th of a degree. This is, for example, what the cameras see as they look out at the field, moving every mirror in micro adjustments. And now, instead of hitting a target the size of this table, or almost even the size of this room, now we're hitting a target the size of a basketball hoop. That target on the right is every single mirror's light being directed inside of an 18-inch diameter basketball hoop. So we have already achieved well over 1,000 degrees centigrade, can go all the way up to 1,500 degrees centigrade, and power all these industrial processes. We can take a huge amount of CO2 out of the world by using the sun at intense concentration to do this. This company we started is called Heliogen. We just announced this 2 weeks ago. We got global interest from this. We want to scale this like crazy, and it's fantastic for this region, because this region, almost more than its natural resource of oil, has sunshine. Sunshine is an incredible natural resource, and harvested like this, we can really, really make a big difference. My dream for this is to deploy this at scale. Almost like farming. That was part of the inspiration for this. As opposed to building this as a big construction project, one tower at a time, I envision this being rolled out almost like tractors, just scaling these things out on the ground and being waken up almost like seeds, but by software, being woken up to all point their reflected light to the single spot where we can make these high temperatures. And with the high temperatures, we can make cement with low CO2, we can make hydrogen. Green hydrogen is the holy grail, because hydrogen is a transportable fuel. Unlike electricity, if you make electricity from the sun in the desert, it's very, very hard to monetize far away, because almost like shipping produce, it has a limited distance it can travel. Fuel, we have the entire infrastructure of the whole world to be able to carry everywhere. So what's incredible about this is it can take a resource with high sun and turn it into a powerful exporting capability. The final thing, carbon capture and removal. How do we use CO2 as our friend? Well, it's really, really hard to take CO2 out of the atmosphere. It's hard to take CO2 out of the atmosphere because it's in there at 415 parts per million. You have to move a lot of air to get 1 ton of CO2 out. You basically need to move 1.5 million cubic meters of air, or a Roman Colosseum's worth of air, to get 1 ton of CO2. And the existing methods to do that are way too expensive. They're very large, high capital cost. So what we did is combine the energy vault idea of energy storage, the heliogen idea of solar concentration, into a new concept we're calling carbon capture that can take CO2 and water out of the atmosphere in the desert. We can take this great resource of sunshine and do 2 things at the same time: create water and take the CO2 out. It's basically somewhat like a super tree. It's a tree, but 150 times better, because trees only take out CO2 at a very low rate. We're doing it much more powerfully with a combination of software and the solar concentration. Effectively, what we're doing is turning desert into forest. 1 acre of this system takes out 1 ton of CO2 per day. That's equivalent to 150 acres of forest. So it really is a powerful way that can actually make a big impact. And just to do the math, I tried to scale this up if we wanted to take out the entire 38 gigatons of CO2 that man makes. And amazingly, in a 390-mile square, you could take out all the CO2 of planet Earth. That all of transportation, all of manufacturing, all of industry, every plane, every car, every truck, you could take all of that CO2 out with a land area that size. The whole goal is just make it cost-effective to do so, and then we can scale that like crazy. Importantly also, this was amazing, another fact, with only 4% of the land of Saudi Arabia, you could make enough hydrogen from the sun to equal all of its oil exports. Just 4% of the land. And even the Emirates, which is so big on vision but small in land area, even there's easily enough land to way exceed the amount of oil exports just from the sun. So the idea of using the sun to convert that to fossil fuel, to the equivalent of fossil fuel, but solar, green, renewable fuel, is so powerful. We're very, very excited about that. Basically, by taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and making green hydrogen, you can make every fuel. Every fuel is made from a combination of the C's and H's, and that's so powerful, and I'm so excited about that. So energy really is the trillion-dollar industry that we can improve with software, creativity, and Moore's Law. Each of these ideas has a big potential impact. As you can tell, I'm very, very passionate about making these a reality in my lifetime. I'm devoting myself completely to doing this. I would love to talk to any of you about partnering to help us make this a reality. If you can help me spread this vision, share this with others, I'd love to talk to any of you about spreading this, new partnerships, and making this a reality in this region. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience.